After Fallout 4, a lot of questions were beginning to emerge in regards to Bethesda as a game developer. Some of it was genuine concern with the more casual gamer-friendly approach that they took to various mechanics of that game. The voice protagonist decision proved to be a controversial one, especially with the simplistic dialogue options and lackluster writing. Fallout 4 also really started to show the age of Bethesda's game engine, with frequent performance issues, loading screens, stiff facial animations, clunky gunplay, and of course bugs. These criticisms at the time weren't really taken too seriously by mainstream audiences, just as they weren't for Skyrim before, largely because the game was still extremely fun with tons of cool things to do throughout the Commonwealth. That changed though with Fallout 76. It was a true wake-up call for Bethesda game studios. Bethesda's venture into a multiplayer live service started off as a nightmare, and over time it became abundantly clear that the main Bethesda studio in Maryland didn't really care too much about the project. Its existence was to keep the Fallout brand alive and making money, just as ESO has existed until we maybe someday get the Elder Scrolls 6. Todd Howard and his team's main focus since Fallout 4's release has been on their single-player space RPG Starfield. A fresh start, a new franchise, and increased pressure to deliver. Not necessarily just because of the question marks surrounding Bethesda's recent games, but also because the company was acquired by Microsoft, and Starfield is now the biggest and maybe most important first-party exclusive for Xbox in the last decade or so. This point is further exasperated by the abysmal state of Redfall, the Bethesda-published game from the award-winning studio Arcane that was supposed to hold gamers over until Starfield's arrival, but that failed miserably. And with such a dumpster fire, it made many wonder if that same fate would be felt with Starfield. Fortunately though, Starfield is not another Redfall at all. While Bethesda and Xbox leadership were adamant that it would not be, something most of us recognized with the impressive Starfield gameplay showcase that happened this summer, I have played this game a lot. For the last 2 weeks, I have explored all reaches of the galaxy. I've discovered some of the biggest secrets of the universe, fought off droves of space pirates addicted to the idea of turning me into toaster strudel, became a space ranger defending innocent, hardworking farmers from abusive powers, joined forces with some of the brightest minds that exist to chart humanity's next leap forward. Starfield is the culmination of almost all of Bethesda's past games. It's very obvious that Todd Howard and his team took to heart the criticisms that they faced with Fallout 4 and 76. While I personally didn't hate Nora and Nate like some did, it truly was a step backwards in terms of role-playing, and this time Bethesda chose to go back to the voiceless protagonist, a decision that truly enhanced the experience and unlocked more creative opportunities for the player's journey throughout the universe. It starts with a character creator, which is packed with more options than ever. Change your character's skin tone, hair, eyes, age, thinner, thickness, and while all of that is great, the real highlight for myself is towards the end of the character creator, in which you can decide your background, who you are in the vastness of space. Each of these options come with starter skills that align with who you are choosing to be. The homesteader gives you an immediate advantage for when you set foot on the surface of an alien planet rich in materials. The diplomat allows you to talk things down instead of escalating a conversation into a bloodbath. The gangster pretty much allows you to entertain that exact reality, using brutality to get your way. I myself went with the space scoundrel, which all around fit the player that I wanted, someone who is a capable pilot, a smooth talker, and is effective in combat. Fortunately, your background isn't something you just slap onto your character. Throughout the game, whenever it is relevant, there are some exclusive dialogue options that make use of who you are. It might not be on the same level as, say, Baldur's Gate 3, but Bethesda does make your chosen identity matter, especially with how you choose to develop your character. However, this is a point more relevant to dialogue rather than gameplay. Being a Han Solo-like badass, it made working with the space pirates of the Crimson Fleet easier, as I could relate to these characters in a variety of ways. Now, besides your background, then there's traits. This was the big treat in my opinion, as you can give yourself a leg up in certain parts of the galaxy while also feeling some repercussions from that choice. These traits more or less feel like a continuation of your background. I personally chose to have my parents alive, the adoring fan to follow me around, and to always be wanted. And surely enough, this very much was worth it. While there are some other options I would love to try out on future playthroughs, like having alien DNA or being a local of Neon, I genuinely found myself laughing a bit at some of the corniness of being around your parents, because this isn't some one-off gimmick. They show up in random moments and sometimes even surprise us with gifts. Dad at one point brags about how he won big at the gambling gambling table and won a ship that he has no use for. I did also choose to be a wanted man, as I enjoyed the idea of being hunted down, and that again very much plays out consistently. Sometimes I'll be met for a confrontation in space in which a huge fight breaks out. Sometimes on the surface of a random planet, a ship will land nearby full of bounty hunters attempting to track me down. As you progress through the game, you are presented with the option to remove these traits, but I really feel like these were highlights of Starfield and ultimately helped me roleplay as the space scoundrel that I wanted to be. Now, Starfield gets off to a bit of a slow start and then really takes off. You are a space miner working for a company called Argos, and then soon after you're tracking down the secrets of the universe. The game's premise is largely built around you discovering mysterious artifacts that are throughout the universe and trying to uncover what all of this means. Without diving into any real spoilers, the narrative of Starfield is surprisingly competent. I say that as someone who was a critic of Fallout 4's narrative and felt the writing at times was a mess. This time around, it is much sharper with some great acting performances all around. It still has some silliness, but it definitely is an improvement with some truly special moments, which makes sense being that one of the main individuals responsible for Fallout 4's best story DLC, Far Harbor, led the charge on Starfield's main quest line. And it's not just that the narrative is more intriguing, but also the quest design is more varied. It isn't always going to X, eliminating a group of enemies and then flying to Y. Bethesda does a good job of utilizing their open-ended approach to missions with giving players choice that is felt throughout the experience. There are some massive intense set pieces, one of which took me for a spin with the revelation that things were amiss. But this praise for the main story's quests has to be sung for the game's side quests as well, which like many past BGS experiences, rivals the main plot in terms of fun factor. In Skyrim you could join different guilds, and Fallout it was different factions all vying for power over the Commonwealth, and in Starfield we're introduced to multiple powers that have a somewhat steady pace that at any given moment could explode into a galactic civil war based on our actions. That of course is an appreciation for the more important side content that feels as meaningful as our space exploring journey, because as great as it is to venture into the unknown, it's also nice to be able to shape what we do know. And as you jump from planet to planet, there are other smaller stories to uncover which still carry fun and unique decisions with how to approach them, whether that be pretending to be someone who's wanted to help them survive, joining a corporation and taking part in some espionage against their competitors, or helping a colony ship settle on a planet that is already owned by a powerful Holiday Inn. I do think Starfield features one of Bethesda's better main quest lines that goes in a surprising different direction that I hadn't really thought of but was kind of delighted by. However, I do get the sense it won't be for everybody, as this definitely doesn't come close to say the Reaper threat in Mass Effect and the narrative prowess of that storyline. It's very different. It really hits at what it means to be a space explorer in the distant future in which humanity has colonized and explored much of the universe. Along for the ride is the people of Constellation, the organization of space explorers that work together to decipher the mysteries that have been left behind. Much of your time in Starfield, you'll find yourself surrounded by these individuals, not necessarily just at their headquarters, the Lodge, or in their space station, the Eye, but also as companions. And just like in Fallout 4 fashion, each of these companions have rich backgrounds and quest lines for us to take on. However, these are only accessible by developing and building your relationship with them. I myself spent much of my time with the leader of Constellation, Sarah Morgan, and over time she opened up about her United Colony history, which led us to confronting some of her past errors. And again, like Fallout 4, you can develop these relationships into a romance. It goes from flirting to actual commitment. Despite what the ESRB rating said, I did not come upon any jetpack sex, well, at least yet. Another factor that was really key to Starfield's quests having some real weight and intrigue is the dialogue system being better fleshed out. And again, in Fallout 4 this was simplified, and in Starfield it's not. You get full lines of dialogue, some of which that clearly put you down evil or good routes, some that better delve into the topics at hand. In addition to your background, whatever skills you choose also factor into different unique dialogue options, and of course this all impacts our companions who do have opinions about what we're saying. And then there is the persuasion system, which is a fantastic new addition. At various times you'll be hunting for information, trying to de-escalate a situation, or maybe even intimidating someone. This system allows you to attempt to convince whoever you're talking to agree with your position. As someone who very much enjoys talking my way out of unnecessary violence, this was a great tool to have at my disposal. Starfield very much carries its Bethesda DNA as a badge of honor, phenomenal handcrafted content that gives you the player a choice with how to complete it. It doesn't change its core formula too much, but it does does experiment by going a No Man's Sky-esque route with procedural generation. Land on any planet, land wherever you want, 1,000 planets to choose from. All of that sounds great on paper, but unfortunately I found myself not caring much at all about this content. It was more or less always the same discoveries, the same structures and outposts mixed with a few radiant quests for you to take on, minerals to be mined, and horrifyingly ugly aliens to discover. There is also restrictions, as you can't walk around the entire surface of a planet without having to jump back into your spaceship and land in a different zone. For many, this will be exciting, especially with mod potential in the future. For myself, it's the same more or less meh feeling that I had when I loaded up No Man's Sky back in 2016 on PS4. The similarities to No Man's Sky may feel unwarranted, as both games are striving for different goals, but I will admit, when I first loaded in and began my approach to a planet like Jemison, I thought I could fly into the atmosphere and land. After a minute or two, I realized the limitations of Bethesda's approach here to space travel, as I wasn't at all getting closer to the planet. Instead, what awaited me was popping up the planet's map in a menu, choosing a landing spot, then a short loading screen, and finally a quick cinematic animation of my ship landing. Starfield doesn't feel as seamless as it should be with how reliant it is on loading screens. To be fair though, even getting space anything working with Bethesda's engine kind of feels like a miracle. And really, even if it is mostly an illusion of flying through space, it's a damn fun one. Designing and piloting your own ship is a blast, especially with some of the quest lines that throw you into saving a colony ship or navigating a debris field as space pirates attempt to gun you down. There additionally is further complexity to these space encounters, as you can take an enemy ship offline and at times choose to board and take the ship. I definitely feel that the best new addition to gameplay is flying through space on your own ship, even if the approach isn't on the same level as, say, No Man's Sky or Star Citizen. But gameplay in general does feel very familiar, and that is because many of the systems that were featured in Bethesda's last mainline Fallout game are here, and at the very least improved. Design your own dream outpost on the outskirts of the universe. Unlock unique skills that transform your experience with meaningful new features. Craft specific materials, suits, and weapons through workbenches. Use your digipicks to open locked rooms and containers. Loot every single item that your scanner identifies, including the alluring, legendary gear that come with additional gameplay boosts, music that complements the discoveries we're making, or the intense combat encounters that we find ourselves in. All of that is here. There are some surprises in store with gameplay, some of which Bethesda has teased in their own marketing. I won't comment on this much further other than saying it adds a cool new layer to combat encounters that can transform the battlefield. Zero-gravity battles are also an experience that feel thrilling and intense, as it adds verticality to the mix, as you use your booster pack to slingshot yourself around from cover to cover, looking in all directions to figure out where incoming fire is coming from. I do have to acknowledge though, gunplay that doesn't rely on Fallout's VAT system is something that does take a bit of time getting used to, but fortunately, it does feel most of the time very fluid and smooth, especially as you move around, gravity or not. I did play this game on normal difficulty for the lion's share of my time, and it wasn't something that ever felt overwhelming, except maybe in space when you're surrounded by numerous high-level ships, but on the ground, you do have some bullet sponges, but nothing that ever was too much of a challenge, no matter the level or size of said enemy. Finding that right weapon with godlike stats certainly makes a difference, not just in terms of how quickly you can eliminate your foe, but also in terms of the enjoyment of said encounter. It also helps that Bethesda has continued to enhance their enemy AI, which does feel more responsive to our actions. Very often you'll see them running for cover and not sitting around waiting for us to put a handful of bullets where the sun doesn't shine. Though this still is not perfect, as enemies will clip through walls, sometimes just stopping movement completely, their dead bodies will sometimes bounce around, and one high-level enemy's health wouldn't properly decrease after putting a full clip into them. This is an example of Bethesda jank that I don't think is ever going away, especially as long as Creation Engine remains. At the very least, there is a whole new arsenal of toys for us to utilize in combat, most of which feel satisfying to shoot, whether that be against a space pirate, a robot, or Starfield's version of a Deathclaw. Navigating to these weapons can be a bit of an annoyance at first, as you really have to rely on favoriting whatever you wish to use. The menus in this game and the overall UI design feels like a clunky mess. It took me a handful of hours until I really grasped just holding down the set course button to jump to different planets for missions. Once you get down into any of the major cities on various planets, I wish you luck finding your way about, as Bethesda's surface maps are quite frankly horrible and offer zero insight into where specific vendors can or can't be found. This can be frustrating when you have an inventory full of contraband and you forget where exactly you can go to trade the items without them being lost and you being put in a jail cell facing a hefty fine. This point also extends to inventory management and the amount of health items that carry a +5 or less to health, but you can only utilize it by going to your inventory aid menu and gobbling it all down at once. Starfield definitely needs to improve on this front in the future, whether through patches or the inevitable big story expansion stuff. I think one of the big concerns that really overshadowed Starfield was whether or not the game would still be packed with content, and it very much is. It was the question of how much will procedural generation factor into the experience, and it really doesn't if you choose to ignore it, which is entirely possible as the game never really pushes you to explore the big red dots on the game's map of the universe. Obviously that will be different for those who plan to spend 1,000 or so hours in the game, but for those just interested in handcrafted content, even then there's an abundance of things to do and discover. You're almost overloaded with so much stuff right when you get into Jemison for the first time. But Bethesda, as one of the best world builders in the industry, is on full display here. A brand new franchise rich with lore for players to learn about, whether that be the history of how humanity was forced off of Earth, or the foundation and rise of factions such as the Freestar Collective and the United Colonies. Factions that we can join for extensive quest lines that are packed with exciting rewards and choices, as well as complexity with their unique personality and firm approach to governing. Perhaps though what I find the most impressive about Starfield is the handcrafted locations, with New Atlantis maybe being their biggest one ever, as it's massive in both size and scope, with more NPCs than ever in a BGS game walking about, unique vendors and businesses to interact with, tons of side content to make some easy credits from, there's multiple different open areas for you to explore with above and below ground, the palette giving clear indication of the power disparity here. It's a location that is full of life, activity, and stories to take on. It's the closest thing to a green earth that the game presents you with. Besides New Atlantis, you have other lively locations such as Neon, which feels like it was plucked from Star Wars' Coruscant. Sidonia is the main populated area of the Sol system, the Kia space station ruled by the Crimson Fleet, and Aquila City holds strong Western vibes and values, being the capital of the Freestar Collective. These are the main hubs of the galaxy, each packed with their own unique personality, but outside of that, there's a lot of darkness. Abandoned outposts and caves is something that you see often. You feel that claustrophobic anxiety exploring some of these locations, just as you did sometimes when stepping foot in a dungeon in Skyrim or a vault in Fallout. The atmosphere of these environments are beautifully done, and all around I feel Bethesda does a great job bringing out the emotion of each handcrafted area. This isn't necessarily an easy task, with much of the universe being boring, resource-heavy rocks, and I can appreciate the hard work that they did in adding unique, diverse places for us to find throughout. And while I don't think Starfield is necessarily this graphics darling, I do think Bethesda has taken another step forward in this regard. Fallout 4 ran into a lot of issues with textures and its art direction, with it often looking quite flat, but with Starfield that isn't as much of a problem. It definitely feels more consistent, but even then I do think compared to the rest of this industry, Bethesda's graphics at times can look impressive, but at other times also look a bit dated. For example, whenever I was in space, I truly felt like this was a current gen experience, but when you come face to face with characters, it still doesn't quite look right. Facial animations is something that Bethesda has struggled with, and while I do feel like faces have more expression than ever before in Starfield, the eyes of these characters can look very unnatural and stiff. There's one scene in which a female character was telling me that she felt like crying, and all I could do was stare deep into her plastic eyes, which couldn't come close to conveying the emotion that was intended. This is actually what holds back various moments throughout the game, and I don't believe the answer is, well, it's a Bethesda game, what do you expect? That feels like an excuse for lackluster animation. Fortunately though, this isn't felt throughout the entire time. Just having a conversation about XYZ that doesn't require tons of emotion works well enough. It's just really when characters are meant to be more expressive where it becomes obvious that Bethesda's technology is struggling to keep up. Performance and bugs have plagued Bethesda like no one else in this industry. It's gotten so bad that it almost feels like it was treated as a joke up until Fallout 76 came about, and the quality of the content finally was just as bad as how the game ran. Bethesda was a reputation that needed to be shaked, and that lengthy delay likely ensured this game didn't continue it. Starfield is quite polished, probably the most polished BGS game to date, but it still has issues. I can only speak to my experience playing on the Xbox Series X, but yes, there were still some quests bugged, one of which locked me to having a companion with me until it was completed. Bit of an issue when that quest is stuck. I eventually did figure out a workaround after a few hours. Another problem was an extreme cold weather alert that got stuck, and whenever I entered or exited any location, it would beep for a solid minute straight. The only workaround with this was loading an older save and not fast traveling while on an extreme weather planet surface, as that seemed to be some sort of trigger. Besides that, I did suffer 3 crashes, which may be linked to Xbox's quick resume feature, 1 infinite loading screen, not being able to land my ship at New Atlantis after selling contraband that was bugged, my character becoming stuck in combat randomly at times while near Aquila City, enemy NPCs would sometimes freeze or glitch, and bizarrely NPCs would all go bald and at a few points losing their faces entirely, looking like something straight out of Assassin's Creed Unity back in the day, which yes, it was a bit horrifying to look at. By Bethesda standards though, this is not that bad, which really is saying a lot about just how poorly many of their games have launched in the past. So by no means is Starfield a perfectly polished game, but it is an improvement that still does need a bit of work, and for the most part the game was able to maintain a solid 30 FPS on console during any and all situations. The only times I noticed any actual dips was when entering into a major HUD like Aquila City. If Starfield had launched last November as was intended, I do fear what the state of the game would have been then. The delay certainly seems like it was worth it. Overall, Starfield in my eyes is a solid win for Bethesda and Microsoft, coming at a time where it was very much needed. Will it meet these sky-high expectations that some have had for this game? It's difficult to say, maybe not. The same could be said about whether or not Starfield does enough to stand on its own next to Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, Bethesda's iconic franchises. Todd Howard in the past spoke about building a game that players keep coming back to for years to come, and you can easily see the foundation that has been set, not just in terms of DLC, but modding potential. Starfield nails the most important area that matters most, fun factor. It presents various mechanics that players can get sucked into for countless hours of immersive fun. It is far from perfect, feeling dated at times, featuring some annoying bugs and that usual Bethesda jankiness, but Starfield is a mostly enjoyable blast across the universe fueled by fantastic world building, deep customization, improved RPG mechanics, fun side quests, exciting ship combat, and a surprisingly well-crafted narrative that hits deep at what it means to be a space explorer in the distant future. Anyway, Starfield is set to launch in the coming days. Are you excited for it or not? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, including the first thing that you plan on doing when you gain access to the vast universe. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, and consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.